Wonderful. So we're so grateful that you're here, and I guess we could get started.
Yes, and we're going to bring up our National President, Dorothy Tucker,
Okay.
for a few words.
Thank you, and welcome. Good morning.
Good morning.
I had this really short but inspiring speech for you this morning, and I am not going to read it or say it because I think it is more important for me to tell you what's happening in Chicago, and in case you have not heard. There are 4 journalists at the ABC station in Chicago that are now being tested for COVID-19. The photographer and the reporter went to the hospital where a patient was being treated and interviewed a food service worker. Then they came back to the station, and the photographer, male photographer, shook hands with another photographer. The photographer who went to the hospital is married to a woman who also works at the station. All 4 of them are now being tested and have been sent home. So, here's the bottom line. You should respectfully decline to interview anyone who has the virus. I know that our job is to get the story. Our job is to be first with the story. Our priority is to be safe. And that's what you have to remember in your day-to-day job. So you cannot do your job if you are quarantined. And the results are not yet in, but it obviously hits home for me, and I can tell you that you know what's happening in your city, you know what's happening in your community. You know we want to get out there and we want to get that exclusive, we want to get that FaceTime, Skype, phone. Okay? That's the way this is going to be until things settle down. And it's not being, I think it is an abundance of caution and it's real. Okay? So that's one. The other thing is that in your seats, you will see something that is dear and important to me. One thing I said I wanted to do when I campaigned was to begin to do surveys. We sent out surveys. This is a job satisfaction survey, asking you questions like, have you ever felt like you've been discriminated against? What do you do? What position do you have? How much money do you make? Do you feel like you're supported in your job? We've not had a job satisfaction survey done in this organization since 1988. The results were in 1993. That was important to me, but here's the bottom line. We got 398 of them back. That is not enough. I know they're in your spam mail. I know you got yet another email from NABJ. You may have ignored it. So I am just on a personal campaign. Since you will not fill them out, you being the generic word, then I will take them to you. So that's what this is in your seat. I have the pens, I have the pencils. And obviously there is an incentive. Everybody who hands me a survey fully completed can then compete for 2. We're gonna give out 2 today, free registrations to the conference in DC. And needless to say, we are not going to cancel it. So thank you so much and be safe.
So before we get started with our first panel state of play, so we can have those panelists come to the front. But before we do that, we do want to recognize some of our national board members who are here in attendance. Founder Allison Davis is right here in the front. If you could just wave your hand. Thank you so much for coming. She's also streaming this and recording parts of this as well. Our Vice President for Print, Marlon Walker, is in the building too. Marlon, thank you for coming. Our past Region 1 Director, Johan Calhoun, is here as well. Thanks so much for coming, Johan. And anybody else? Okay.
So for the past few years, we've decided to open the day up by hearing from some of our colleagues who are really at the forefront of a lot of the breaking news and emerging issues in the industry and just in the world today. And they often just happen to be millennials, young Black journalists. So we're so excited to start today with our annual panel, The State of Play, that's moderated by Wesley Lowry. So everyone please come up and join us on stage.
They're like, now's not the time for manners.
All right, clap it up for them, y'all. It's gonna be a good conversation.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Hold on. All right, so I think it's a little better. Good morning, everyone. I'm Wesley Lowry, formerly of the Washington Post, now of CBS. And I'm really excited to kick off this morning's conversation and today's conference by highlighting and talking with some of the stars of our organization, folks who are doing great and important work and who are in our newsrooms every day. And just to get a sense of what work they're doing, what challenges they're facing, and what this industry looks like, for the working and rising stars of Black journalism. So I've got a really esteemed panel next to me, although the two people with the same name is just next to each other, so it's a little confusing. And so what I want to just start off by doing is I'm going to have them introduce themselves, because that's always better than having someone else screw your bio up. And as you guys do that, I'd like you to introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and also maybe start by answering, what you think the biggest challenge facing Black journalists today is. And with that, I'm going to
Are we going in order?
We can go whatever order you all want.
I'm sweating. Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Jordan Rowling. I am currently the host and producer of Billboard News, and I'm a correspondent for NBC's show New York Live. That's what I do. I think the biggest challenge for Black journalists currently, from my experience, I'm usually the only Black person in the room or the only Black journalist in the organizations that I work for. So for me, I think it's either getting people to flip opinions or join in conversations that I'm trying to have, or and really understand what is important to brown communities and why it's important to be telling those stories. I think that's the biggest challenge in general. I think that's, you guys probably all have experienced that as well, but for me, I would say that's it.
Hi everyone, I'm the other Jordan on the panel, Jordan Coleman. I'm a reporter at Bloomberg News, and I write about retail and apparel and shopping and commerce and all of those things. I think, just piggybacking off of what Jordan just said, I think another challenge for African American reporters is just the power dynamics in newsrooms. Because in order to pitch and be able to get some of the things you want to do across, you do have to convince management, and sometimes there's that tension of, okay, is sounding like a complaint? How do I just convince people in a way that they'll hear it and take our concerns seriously?
I'm Justin. I'm a sports anchor for Pix 11 News, as well as a sideline reporter for CBS Sports. To piggyback on that, I think, at least from the sports landscape, one of the biggest challenges a lot of journalists are facing, specifically Black people, is trying to show news directors that local sports still matters. Obviously, for a lot of people in this room, understanding when you work in local sports or just in local markets in general, there's only going to be maybe 1 to 2 sports people, and then they're always trying to fight for time in their sports blocks. So trying to find different ways to show a viewer that this sports story is always going to matter, and that no ESPN as well as other big conglomerates aren't going to be the ones to find the stories that you're doing in your own backyard.
It's really good. Yeah. So I'm sorry, this is just such a great panel, and I'm listening to everything everyone's saying. I'm just like, dang, I'm last. So my name's Bill. I'm a front page editor at HuffPost. We're no longer the Huffington Post. HuffPost. I gotta always say it. I'm sorry. Let's see, what I do at HuffPost, so pretty much I come up with like the big splash headlines for the front page. I send the annoying push notifications to your phone. I assign stories to a team of writers and reporters when I'm on. And I pretty much do just about everything there, it feels like. So one of the biggest challenges for, I guess, facing Black journalists that I think is really getting people into the door. So like people who know me know that I'm always trying to share links and share, I'm always trying to figure out how to get Black people into our field. And it's really tough because it always just feels like either you're getting ghosted by a recruiter or somebody just like, it just feels like there are not enough people that look like us in leadership and hiring roles. And it makes it kind of difficult, especially like for Black folk to even get our foot in the door. So that's one of the big challenges that I think is facing like Black journalists today.
Well, that actually, Phil, that sets up perfectly the first question I want to ask everyone, right? Is we're talking about the state of play for Black journalists, and I think in order to effectively do that, we have to figure out how many Black journalists we're even working with, right? Each of us up here works in a different newsroom environment from the rest of us. What is it like for you all in terms of who you're working with, right? Are you working with Black colleagues, with Black editors? What does it look like when you're bringing the names of perhaps folks in the audience to your hiring managers? And what is the state of play in our newsrooms in terms of people like us getting these jobs and holding these jobs and working in these newsrooms? And what issues arise around those things? And we can popcorn around. We don't always have to start with this door. We can start with the other door.
I'll jump in. Okay. Yeah, so I think that's a really good question. So recently on my team, I have a team of 10 people who cover consumer, and I was like the only Black person on the team for a long time, the youngest one. And then just recently we got another young Black person on the team, and that completely changed the dynamics because now the conversation, me and him, we can talk and like ideate and pitch and whatnot, and then everyone, it's just like we can now have this collective louder voice on our team. And so it's less of a, okay, well, that was just Jordan's idea. She's off in the corner just thinking, but having other people behind you being able to support that, I think that's really powerful, and that's only one other person. But a lot of the times I've been on teams when you're the only one, and it's just a challenge of even trying to explain certain things. And then you just kind of feel like you're out there on fate, So I think that's the biggest thing, and it's nice to be able to get interns and other people at lower levels, but I think the next real push is like to get people at the top who are Black and who understand that experience.
Yeah, I know one experience that I dealt with personally is that a few months ago, last year, I was laid off, and I guess something that's powerful that you really don't realize is how strong your Rolodex is in terms of people that are willing to help you out and support you. So the amount of people that texted, called, let alone just reached out on social media like, oh man, I forgot to catch up because everybody's trying to climb to the top, and I guess it's a rat race or everyone has their personal ambitions, and you forget those people that are trying to climb up there with you that you don't forget to check in. You may see them annually at the NABJ convention, but along that line, I think it's important to realize that not to think about that just when you're in a time of need, and to reach out to those people in your circle, because there's a lot of people that are rooting for you that you really just don't realize. And people that are high up, there are rooms that people are talking about your name, whether you realize that or not. And I think that's something that everyone needs to realize in the state of journalism, that we're gonna have those low times, especially people in television. You're traveling and you're a nomad, working in these smaller markets. A lot of people going through depression and living paycheck to paycheck. But there's a lot of people out there that really want to see you succeed. So as you see some of these people and you're networking with them, whether it's just in this room or coming to the convention in DC, understand, like, be persistent and follow up with these people, because there's a lot of people, as we're trying to rise up in the ranks, we want to pull people up with us and open the doors and see more people like us talking about the issues that really matter.
Piggybacking off of Justin, I work in entertainment journalism and lifestyle journalism mainly, and then documentary on the side. My experience early on when I first started working for Billboard, which is a very white company, when you're in front of the camera and you're a correspondent, you're also being hired for your look. Like if they already have a white host, they need to fill their diversity check and bring in a brown host. So that was my experience early on with Billboard. I was brought in as to balance out the teams. In LA, we have a white host and a black host, and then I'm the in between. So that's usually my situation, is I'm brought on as the brown girl to represent our community. And at first it could seem like that's something I don't appreciate, but at the same time I have to think of it I have the opportunity to really represent us and tell our stories. My team at Billboard, the only brown people that are in the building are the hip hop editor, or basically the people that work in hip hop. I've had struggles with trying to make sure we are telling diverse stories and representing not only our community but also the charts and what's reflective of what consumers want to listen to, or what news we care about in entertainment and lifestyle, and which artists we're following. And I was working on a show about emerging artists, and I actually had to have a meeting with our head of diversity, because we had 30 episodes booked out, and the host in LA had spearheaded this whole project. And I went through and I counted, because I was this is really important to me. And out of her 30 talent that she had booked, she had no black artists that she was interviewing and telling their stories. And I was
for emerging talent.
Music. Yeah, in music.
No black girl.
Right. Yeah. So that was something. It was really challenging for me, and I feel that's always the struggle when you work in a corporation like that. My experience with NBC has been vastly different. I work on a predominantly all-female team, which is an experience in itself. I love the diversity on that end. And obviously I'm on a show called New York Live. Jackie Reed is one of the hosts, and she's an incredible black woman. And my team is full of Brazilian producers, and so I am still one of the correspondents that's telling stories of the black community, and I'm fine with that. But they're so open and welcomed to tell our stories. They don't mind when I wanna go deep into different boroughs and get out of Manhattan and show you the coolest bagel spot in the city that just popped up. So it's been, it just depends on the outlet for me.
Okay, well, let me speak to the experience of the 6 black folk that work at Post. No, it might be more like 7, more like 7 or 8.
One matters, right?
Round that up to 10.
Yeah, so interesting. But just to speak to the experience of being out in the field, when I was in South Carolina, it was so fun to run into other black journalists who were in South Carolina at the same time, and we went out, got drinks, and we all just started ranting about how non-diverse the entire industry is. It's just the camaraderie that you have with other journalists that you meet, and it's just kindred spirits, because you're able to kind of discuss a lot of the same issues that are happening in these different newsrooms, because they are different, but a lot of the experiences are the same. So that is a thing. Now, for my role as front page editor there at HuffPost, I'm able to assign diverse stories, so I appreciate that. But the issue is that sometimes they are missed because we don't have enough writers. And then we don't have writers who understand the stories that from the neighborhoods that we're trying to cover. Those are issues. Those are real issues that we have. So just going back to that whole point about hiring and making sure that people are getting into these positions, we all have that obligation to try to push people into these into our field and try to explore and expand diverse voices in the journalism industry.
Well, and a lot of you touched on kind of thematically this idea of, even once we're in a newsroom or at an organization, what are the trade-offs or decisions we have to make about when we use our voice, when we raise our voice, when we pitch a thing, how we pitch a thing, how we get a whole team of people to all pitch the same thing so we can actually maybe get it. What does that look like, working in, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we're all in majority white newsrooms, right? Places that are not, none of us are working for historically black publications or minority specific publications, right? So how do we as black journalists operate in those spaces And what are some of the challenges that present themselves when we're dealing with teams of people who might not get us or understand us? I get this, or I've experienced this as I've worked at places like the Washington Post, where they gave me a lot of latitude. They let me pitch big projects, they let me work on the type of stuff I wanted to do, but I very often had to convince a group of people who didn't look like me or didn't come from my level of understanding of the validity of the idea, right? And so at the end, I might be able to get what I want, right? But I had to make all these political decisions about who I approach first. What do I do? Versus a world where perhaps if we're working for a Black editor, they would immediately go, oh yeah, that sounds dope, and we would move forward, right? What are some of the trade-offs and what are some of the politics of navigating as a Black journalist, a majority white newsroom, to do the type of journalism the work you're trying to do?
I hate saying this, but I feel like because I'm the diversity girl, everything I want to do gets greenlit most of the time because they're like, well, she knows, she's on the money, so she knows. So I guess it's a really big advantage in my situation and with the outlets that I work at is they look at me as an authority and trust me. When it comes to pitching like broader ideas, like show ideas or segment ideas, I gotta go through way more hoops than the white correspondent in LA for sure. But I always rise to the occasion and
Okay.
you kind of forced to.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's also important in those type of situations is like identifying someone who definitely has like cachet or voice in the newsroom, and it's usually a older white man, and so that's kind of how I've done it. It's like
Find the old white man.
older. It doesn't have to be elderly, but just someone who has like a voice and that he's respected by, or they are respected by like higher ups, especially early on. And I think that's just like as a young journalist that while you're trying to figure out how whatever newsroom you're in, you do have to kind of figure out who has the power, and that's how you navigate. So there was an experience last year. Bloomberg owns Business Week, which is the magazine. Every year they put out like a envy list, so stories that we wish we would have written. So just to like kind of highlight other publications and other writers' works. So that one year there was just no stories about Black people outside of sports, and there was no stories written by an African American journalist, which is insane because I think it was 2018. There was so much good news. There was the election. And so I was like, that's insane that we're not envious. We're putting this out there and saying, we're only proud of, this type of work in our industry. So the way, like, I couldn't just walk up to the editor-in-chief and be like, hey, I don't think this was handled well. But the way I went about it was kind of grab this guy's ear and it's like, hey, have you thought that this is kind of awkward that we didn't identify anyone of color or any work that speaks to communities of color? Got that idea in his head, and he was like, that's insane. We should go talk to someone. And so then that's kind of how I just handled that situation, and then that was rectified and we updated the list. But I find like oftentimes, at least at Bloomberg, at that large newsroom, I do have to figure out a strategy like that.
Finding an ally.
Yeah, finding an ally.
Yeah, and like who has the power to get the thing done that you want to get done?
Yeah, and kind of like planting ideas in people's heads, like, and then
Making them think it was their
Their
idea. Yeah.
Of course, I think you both brought up a good point, and one of the things that I found out of my experience is picking your battles and understanding that you play a game of chess or checkers. Of course, you can try to be that person that's going to nitpick every kind of idea, but also gauging the temperature of your newsroom and your editorial staff is very important because you understand that some stuff just isn't going to fly. You can speak to a drywall pretty much when you're trying to explain something, but of course, you coming from a different set of experiences and background, they're just not going to get it through your lens. And then something else that you mentioned, Jordan, I think is important, is that we all hear the term about finding mentors, but something that you should also work on finding at a workforce is a sponsor. So a sponsor is a step up from a mentor. If you've never heard of the term, it's going to be that person that's in those editorial meetings when you're not there. And if someone tries to throw you under the bus and says, Wesley wrote a horrible lead-in, and then the sponsor comes in and said, actually, Wesley and me work on that lead-in together, so I thought it was actually a good job. So it's that person that's advocating for you, pushing you forward, and it's going to be that voice that is going to be making sure that you're going to get those projects greenlit. So try to find those sponsors, and that's going to help you to pitching bigger projects.
And to be clear, my lead-in is always dope. That was a hypothetical.
Yeah, I've been lucky to work at news companies that are pretty. Are pretty progressive as far as like looking for diverse voices. So the issue is not really finding. The issue is not really finding a story. The issue is more so like identifying who's going to write it, because it's not always up to people of color to write stories about communities of color, right? It's up to race is something that we all need to talk about and that we all have to discuss. And so otherwise it's too much, to look at Philip and say, okay, he can write the story about he can write all the stories about Flint, or he can write all the stories about South Carolina or race or whatever, right? So the issue is just being able to identify somebody that can write those stories, and sometimes it's a little tough because HuffPost is pretty large, but it's a very small. It's not. We're not the New York Times, right? So finding people that, I guess every point I'm making is going back to like hiring diverse voices, and maybe this is just like, dang, like I really need to see what happens because we don't have enough people to write these stories. I'm thinking about that right now, but yeah, it's just all pretty much everything goes back to finding these diverse voices, and I guess that's going to be like the recurring theme of it.
Well, and so what do you guys do? Because there is that weird push and pull where you're like, all right, I was here to be like Black correspondent, but also sometimes like I want to write about bagels or whatever. Like how do you all in your own careers and your own trajectory balance those things? It's something I've thought about a lot and I've struggled with, or I've grappled with in my career. Is like, okay, like I want us to be covering these stories and be covering them well, and perhaps I don't always trust all my colleagues to do that, and so I got this one. But then you become that person, and you look up, and it's a year later, and you've spent a year writing about a police shooting and nothing else, right? Or and so how do you all try to balance that? How do you think about it? Because I think we all probably grapple with that question and all operate a little differently depending on how to do that.
I used to work for Al Roker, and he used to always tell me like a very, very old phrase, but the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? So no one's gonna know you're interested in other topics or interested in telling other stories unless you speak up and say that. For me, I'm biracial, so I'm half Black, half white, so I have interests that vary in range, and especially when it comes to entertainment. Like my first concert was Elton John, a white gay man. So so I people know this, right? People know this in my office and in my workplaces. They know that I do have a very, very diverse background and a wide range of interests, and I vocalize that. And so my point being, I think it's very important to always speak up about what you truly are interested in, so you don't get pigeonholed and labeled as one thing.
Yeah, I think just depending on what newsroom you're in, like try other beats, because as being a Black reporter, we're going to be interested in telling stories about our community, and whatever beat you're on, you're going to find an angle that's relating to the Black experience. So I think by being on another beat, so for example, I'm on retail, you'll have other like tools in your toolbox that you can point to and say, no, I can cover this. I understand earnings reports, I understand balance sheets, but in addition, I'm going to tell you about this from the Black experience. So maybe, early on, just thinking about, let me expand to other beats, because at the end of the day, just the way the news industry is set up, you being the Black reporter, they're going to look towards you, whatever beat you're on. So get other type of experience, and then you might realize you like it.
Yeah, I think there's so many different avenues to pitch stories now, and you're trying to show your supervisors that why a story matters. So if they may be apprehensive to you doing a story that is something that is your passion project, but the community is really involved in it, then throw a tweet out there and ask numerous community members to actually respond on stories that they want to see, so you can use that as an outlet. Throw it on Facebook, and they'll see like, oh wow, this is something that we should have covered. So there's so many different ways where you can try to finesse the game, and you can say like, nah, this is something we need to do, and then keep those receipts.
Yeah, let's see, 2016, I found myself I was writing for a news company that shall remain nameless. I was writing for them, and I was writing for them, and I soon found myself. If you all remember that summer, that was I was in Sterling, 2016. I was in Sterling, and then Philando Castile, and then it was just a lot going on that summer, and I found myself soon I had to write all those stories because I wrote one, and they were like, okay, Phil can do the other one, I can do the other one, and I was a young writer at the time, so they were just like, okay, well, just give it to him, he can write it, he knows how to deal with it. And just after a while, I was just like, wait, I didn't sign up to be like, it's important work, obviously, but I didn't sign up for it, right? And so they ultimately tried to push me into a role as far as like just becoming like a race and police correspondent, which I did not, I declined, right? And so we had to be able to kind of have that power. And actually, this goes back to my mentorship. I talked with somebody about that, about writing about race when I was still young writer. And they were just like, if you don't want to do it, like there's power in the word no, and saying no, it's okay. Won't get fired, it's okay. And so I told them, no, and I felt better for it because that's not what I was trying to do at the time. And so just being able to say no and have that power to be like able to decline it, is just I thought was important.
What, for all of you all, what is something, because I think, almost all of us are somewhere like between 5 and 10 years into our career, right? What is something you wish you would have known 5 or 10 years ago as you were entering your career that you know now? That was a good question.
Yeah.
I'll start off. I think just adversity is part of it. I think we a lot of times see the finished product with people that we admire, and we forget to actually find out their story, where they started, what they were actually making when they started off. So it's easy to admire someone on any of the national outlets that you see or see their headline or any of the big newspapers, but there's a story behind that person, and there's a reason why they got there. Yes, there was a lot of people that may have helped them up through that purpose, but there's a lot of people also that are on the brink of just quitting and probably just downright depression. I have a lot of friends in television that they just can't get to traveling back and forth, moving outside of their comfort zone. As I like to say, you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable in this industry, regardless of what avenue that you're going to choose. So I think that adversity is inevitable. It's as simple as that. So if you're trying to do something in this industry, regardless of what your purpose or you feel your greater calling is, understand that you're going to hit some hard times.
And to piggyback off that, I think I wish I would have realized that you have to sometimes just cover beats that you never want to be on. I was covering municipal bonds for 6 months. I did not know what that was. That's just basically
what is it?
I will now say because I learned it's basically loans to cities to help build up their utilities and school systems. That's very important, but it's very, very boring and dense. And I was so angsty the whole time. I was like, I do not like this. This is the worst. I'll never use this in life. This is the worst. But then being able to understand that maybe I think it was 6 months later, the Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, and that is when muni bonds became really important because they weren't able to rebuild because they needed loans and municipal bonds. And then they sent me down there because they're like, well, you spent 6 months understanding that. Great, go cover it. And that's the story I really cared about. So sometimes this is exactly what you said. You sometimes see the finished product of people you admire, but you have to realize that they had to do things to get up to that point. And you might not fully understand why you're put in some positions, but it will pay off if you have an open mind to it. The other side of that too is I wish I would have known that there is power in saying no and that you can say no, because I feel like in journalism school and just the industry at large, there's the idea that you have to do everything. You have to go the next mile and do all these things, put yourself in dangerous, uncomfortable situations. And sometimes that line gets blurred. And that's why I really appreciated what Dorothy Tucker said at the top of this about coronavirus. You can say no. Your safety is the most important. And oftentimes that message isn't said enough. But there is a line between I'm putting myself in an uncomfortable situation for journalism. Talking to people isn't the most comfortable thing all the time. And there's a line between this is unsafe. I'm gonna tell my editor no, here's an alternative.
I think for me, I look back and there were certain careers or certain outlets that I really wanted to be at, and I wish I would have told myself back then that I probably want to pursue a path more as a producer and creating my own platform and something that represents my ideas and where I can speak freely and report freely, and not be so caught up in trying to achieve what somebody else has. Also, like, I mentor a lot of college girls, and I meet with them often, and kind of piggybacking off what Jordan said, you hear them, they tell me these stories, like this girl that I met with 2 days ago, she's interning at CNBC, and she just wants to be in entertainment. Like, I want to be in entertainment, that's why she wanted to meet with me, because she thinks I don't do real journalism, I think. So, you know, she was just like, I don't like this job, I don't know why I'm doing this, but I kept telling her and reminding her, like, this is teaching you like invaluable skills. When I worked for Al Roker, I was the host and associate producer of a show called BizWire TV, and I reported on VC funding, startups, Wall Street, business news, tech news, and this is something I never thought I would be doing, something I would never be interested in doing. And here I am 5 years after that job, and while I am working in entertainment journalism and lifestyle journalism, you know, people still look at that on my resume and in my reel, and I have job opportunities that come around. So now I do a docuseries for Kroger where I meet with small business owners and entrepreneurs and tell their stories of how they became suppliers for, you know, a big major retailer like that. So just realizing that everything you're doing matters, and it's in the perfect order that it's in, and it's happening that way for a reason.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that when I think about that question, one thing I grapple with is, you know, all of us kind of came of age in this industry at a time, like amidst the social media explosion, where we were all told, like, if we weren't our own personal brands, we would never have jobs, and, like, you know, we were kind of in that constant big freak out about what do we do in those spaces. And, you know, I think all of us here have relatively significant followings in various social media spaces. We're all active in that space. But one thing I think about a lot is using that in some ways, not only as a means to an end, but like, I've got the jobs now, and also thinking about, you know, we all in our careers put so much time and effort and energy into developing those followings in that space. And for me, sometimes I have to be able to like flip the switch and turn it off, right? That so much is happening online every single day that it can in fact become a distraction to the journalism I need to be doing today. Right? There are days where what I really need to do is write, and that means I need to like turn everything off and not be in on whatever the trending hashtag is today, or the joke, or teasing people, or like getting my take off about whatever it is. Right? I need to be removed from that space, right? And I think that it's hard because I think that, again, as we all know, building and developing and managing these followings is labor, it's work. It's a thing that we're making creative decisions about all the time. And I think that there's that push and pull of the double-edged sword where we tell people that's something they should invest in and they should do. And also, that can start to become a detriment to the work itself, right? Because the hope of developing a following there is to highlight the work we're doing, right? And so that's something I think about a lot. How do you all think about social media and like your public-facing brands or visibility and how that relates to like the work you're doing? And how do you balance those things?
For me, when it comes to social media, I really don't put everything on my page, and I think it's because I'm very strategic about my brand and where I want it to go. So it's like, if I'm working for one outlet currently, like, I'll let that kind of be my image at the time, but knowing what my plans are for my brand in the future, I really don't have a hard time. If I don't feel like posting, I just won't post and I will disappear. I'm very active on social media. I'm a personality, so people follow me because they want to see behind the scenes of what I'm doing, who I'm interviewing, but I have no problem disappearing because at the end of the day, my mental health is the most important thing to me, so I don't really care about giving people content. I think they're going to follow you anyways because you're creating content that they enjoy. So that's kind of the balance for me, is disappearing and knowing when to go ghost. Also, early on in my career, I was so focused on trying to be this cookie cutter, one size fits all for every brand, instead of being like authentically me. So I would, be very, 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 put a lot of effort into my posts, right? And thinking about, who's gonna see this? How do I look? Is my hair straight? Like, what if someone comes across my profile? And now that I'm 27 now, and this was like, 5 years ago, I straightened my hair every single day, like trying to be this version of myself that technically now, like, talent VPs and outlets don't want. They want someone with a POV, with a point of view, and they want someone who is authentically themselves. So it's a conversation I've had with my agents over the last year, actually. Like, I had like a meltdown and broke down my agent, and I was like, I just want to be myself. I just want to be Jordan. And that's the pressure I think social media puts on you, is to be this like perfect version of a human being. But at the end of the day, that's what you are, is you're a flawed human being. So I think we should, kind of step back away from social media and realize, like, if you want to post about coffee, post about coffee. If you want to post about, your favorite band, post whatever you want. At this point, is how I feel.
Yeah, you can't really be a perfect person on Twitter or anything like that. Just in like my page is a good example. Like, I just put whatever I feel like putting out on there, and I just deal with it later, which sometimes leads to some conversation with the HR, but it's fine. It's okay.
Don't circle back to that.
Right.
I mean, it's fine. Like you were saying, I think more news outlets want people that have a point of view and have thoughts about these things, and as I think as reporters, like not the most, but a lot of successful reporters, especially young reporters today, they have a take online about Bernie Rose or whatever, South Carolina or whatever. Like, people are talking about different things online, and I think that actually does help with your brand, and people are interested in what you have to say because you're there, you're in the news, you are a public figure, right? And so I try to keep that in mind sometimes, but it's not easy all the time, which is why I log off more now than ever.
So we're gonna wrap in a moment, and so as we wrap, I want to give each of our panelists one last opportunity to, what is the thing you want folks listening today, again, perhaps who are 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years behind where we were, who are looking at Jordan, right? Or Phil or Justin, they're like, all right, I want to be where that person is, right? And are working through that journey. What would you say to them? What's one piece of advice you would impart? And before we do that, we're gonna invert this a little bit. How about we do a round of applause for our panelists? The wisdom they've imparted, and then we'll go out with you guys having the last word. And so, what's the piece of advice you would impart?
I guess when I think about my career as it is now, the stories that mean the most to me are not what I'm doing currently. Like, the ones that I look back and I'm like, wow, I really loved that short doc that I produced. And now people don't know that I've done that. I think that I wish I would still be doing more documentary stuff, and I wish that I wouldn't have gotten so caught up in what was making me money versus what was fulfilling me as a storyteller. Some of my favorite stories are, going to Baltimore and post Freddie Gray and talking to kids who were using art as a form of therapy, or I produced a documentary about mixed orientation marriages in the Mormon community, like just telling these diverse, really crazy stories. Those are the most fulfilling, and working with normal people, not people on the Billboard charts, people who are celebrities and who have huge followings. I love just regular, Joe Schmoes, and so I think just realizing like the stories are where you're not really looking sometimes.
I would say that I wish, this kind of goes back to social media, but like it comes back to the work, that not to get so caught up in like, oh, this person did this cool thing up there, oh wow, it looks like they're really enjoying it, but like really thinking about what you want to do, and are you proud of the work that you're doing, even if no one likes that, no one likes the tweet that you put out about this muni bond story or whatnot. Like, trigger, right?
This was a very hard 6 months.
It was very hard, guys. It worked out.
I tweeted her about it.
Oh, man. But like that, you don't need, public adoration for the work that you're doing if you enjoy the work that you're doing and if it's good, because that will add up to something down the line. You have no idea where your career is going to take you, what newsroom you're going to be in. But if you have the skills and you're actively working towards like developing your writing or your shooting or your producing, like focus on that, and then you'll look up and be surprised at where you will land.
Yeah, I guess my advice would go back to when we were talking about social media and trying to understand that there's no definitive path. I think a lot of times because we're on social media, we love to compare and contrast ourselves to other individuals. Our dopamine gets hyped up because we get a certain amount of likes or a certain amount of retweets, but understanding that you have to do your process and due diligence, because as quickly as fame can be, you can lose it even quicker. So it's really easy to fall into that whirlwind of seeing an individual get all this adulation because they're now working at this affiliate, or they're now getting, I guess, credit from other stars because they may see their work, but you're gonna have your time. And I think that's so easy to fall into, especially when you're trying to climb up the ladder and you even see people speaking on panels and like, wow, I wanna be just like that person. But you're gonna have that opportunity, and we also should be doing it for that reason. With journalism, I think the main thing is to solve stories as well as to bring good into the community, whatever avenue you are doing in that sector of journalism, but not just doing it for the likes and understanding that your time is going to come.
Yeah, I think my advice would be just to be open to constructive criticism and, listen when somebody's trying to tell you something. So sound like my grandma. But yeah, pretty much because I go back to when I first started, and I used to just think my editor was being a hater when she told me my stuff was garbage. But she was really being right. Now I'm trying to go back and think, like, dang, she was really right. Like, what did she say? Like back then, what was she saying? But now I really kind of understand like what she was talking about. All the constructive criticism I got from back then has like really helped kind of like shape me into what I do today. So just being open to that.
Let's have one more round of applause for our panel.
Thanks.
We do have time for questions.
Oh, never mind. We got a producer's note. Chelsea's talking to me in my ear. Do you have time? This means they're gonna have to clap the third time, which is fine. But we do have time to get a few audience questions. And so if you've been sitting here thinking, why is this moderator, why is he so bad at his job? Why is he not asking any of the good questions? You now have the opportunity to take the power into your own hands. And so Walter will work the room. Van White here with his
Good morning. Is it still morning? Yes, it's still morning. Good morning. My name is Brianna. I'm still a student at Wayne State University from Detroit. And so we're in an age-old industry where we feel like sometimes the systems and processes are like ingrained, they're set in stone. Do you guys feel like it's possible to change, like where the news industry will be in 10, 20 years, where you guys will be like the top-notch people in a lot of these, entities? How do you guys think or see it changing?
I'm really excited. I think it will change because I'm really excited about the peers that I'm surrounded by. Like, anytime I go to NABJ, I'm like, wow, this industry is going to be super dope in 20 years, like once everyone starts getting even more power and whatnot. I think the steps to get there, what I've started to realize over the past year is that it takes some difficult conversations sometimes and feeling really comfortable, like talking to management and talking to your editors every day, and not just like sitting there. Because oftentimes it's so easy to just like, DM my friend, like, I can't believe they did this. Why did they do this? But like transitioning it to an actual conversation with someone in a newsroom with power, saying like, hey, I think we can handle this different. What is the protocol on this? I had to do it yesterday actually about coronavirus coverage. They like sent me down to a known location of coronavirus, and I was like, I don't think we can.
Start now. Why are you?
I'm like, they tried to send me down there. they tried to, sorry.
Did you go?
Evacuate the
No,
conference?
Guys, I didn't go because I could have just sat there and was like, this is crazy, why are you making me do it? Stomp my feet. Then I realized, hey, there is power in saying no. Here's an alternative. How about I make a phone call? We'll get the same result. You know, what one result could have been bad, but we'll get a healthy result. You know, so I think it takes a lot of conversation, and I think it will change.
Yeah, I would say for the sports landscape, I'm honestly a little nervous, but also excited because as you understand, athletes are controlling their message a lot different now. They don't really need reporters or sit-down correspondents to actually get a story across. They have Uninterrupted, they have Players Tribune, and we've seen some great articles. I'm from Mount Vernon, for example, and Ben Gordon released it was a tragic story. And my barbers used to talk about like, wow, that guy has some mental issues, and he shared all of those stories. So I think as I'm trying to learn to navigate my way through this space, it's exciting, but also a little bit, I guess, there's just some trepidation because you understand that not that your voice doesn't matter less, but you're not going to be as important because athletes can just do something. They can just say to a reporter, no, I'm good. You don't have to read an article or actually go to find out an athlete's thoughts. You can just find them out on an Instagram story or a tweet.
I think I said this earlier, but I feel so hopeful about journalism. As a producer, like I get to create show ideas and concepts, and I think the move from strictly linear to digital has opened up a world of possibilities for journalism. Like you can be, there's so many, we've heard of the term like citizen journalism, right? In like undergrad basic journalism classes. I mean, everyone is a journalist nowadays, like telling very, very diverse stories. And I think when you get to the level that we're at, working at the organizations that we're at, you earn kind of a merit and a badge and a cred where people take you seriously and you can create platforms. And so I feel really hopeful that we'll be those people who come in and create amazing outlets that have not been talked about yet.
So I have a question.
I know. Oh, sorry, Nancy.
You have the microphone. Okay, go ahead. I know we're looking at our future leaders. So 10 years from now, when you are in those top management positions, what is the one thing that you will do or you won't do for that young journalist that you are managing based on your experiences today?
Really good question.
I think that, I think about this a lot, and I think that one of the things that is very difficult, and this is true of managers of every race, of every gender, like the Black managers haven't figured this all the way out, although very often perhaps they might be a little more introspective about it, is that, journalism, especially in bigger newsrooms, is something that is kind of like chaotic by design, and we all accept very often, like, well, of course it's all crazy. I mean, Trump just tweeted this thing, let's all work too many hours and let's go do this thing. And it's a very, ends justify the means profession in a lot of ways because the news is constantly happening. Things are constantly, and I think that, and so I think that sometimes managers and management can become, because they are working under those pressures as well, it can discourage introspection about what's happening, what the environment is, what people's needs are, right? And so I think there's some generational shift with this as well. I think that our generation is one that is very primed to be kind of preemptively understanding in the sense of like, oh wait, maybe she's going through something, should we talk about this? Or, oh, we sent the Black report to 17 police shootings. He or she might have some feelings about this. Perhaps we should talk to them, right? Or it might be difficult for our refugee audio producer on the day of the travel ban. Maybe we should. I think very often there's this understandable sense in a lot of newsrooms that like our editors, our bosses, our managers, our producers, their job is to like toughen us up and to push us into the uncomfortable. And look, and I think that's true, right, to some extent. But also, I think in the most healthy newsrooms and most healthy relationships, that communication works in both directions, right? It's something as simple as like sending that note when you know the person pulled the overnight shift, right? Or, dropping by and saying, hey, that story turned out really well. I knew you were like struggling with it or working hard with it, and that turned out really well. And I think that at least in my experience, all those things sound very obvious and yet do not happen very often, especially at a time when our newsrooms have contracted, when you have managers who are managing more people in management who perhaps never even wanted to be in management or dreamed of being in management, right? When every day, as we're finalizing the front page of the newspaper or finalizing the newscast, the president might tweet something that changes everything, right? Everyone is under this stress and this pressure, and I think in those moments, it's even more important to make sure that like we're actually actively supporting and building each other up, especially when we're in positions of power and leadership.
I think for me, when I think about being a future leader, I don't know the answer to everything, and I don't know what audiences, consumers. I don't know everything. So for me, when I look at my future employees, I'm kind of the person who wants to do it and then ask for forgiveness later. So I think I'm going to approach my leadership role as one that is very like open to everyone's ideas and giving them chances to put on a producer hat and to really flex that muscle and give their ideas a shot. And then be like, oops, we screwed up later, and I'll take the blame.
Yeah, I think something that I'm doing now that I would also do once I get higher up in the ranks is just believing in somebody. I think the power of that alone, especially for someone younger, is to show them a vision that they don't see necessarily for themselves, can actually just magnify someone and just speak volumes. So once you have those individuals that try to be in your shoes, you can let them know that you can do something better than I'm even doing right now. So that belief in someone and that law of attraction and sharing with someone and investing the time, because time to me is the most valuable commodity. It's just something you just don't get back. So as you get higher up, and you can just do it now, you see people that are under you, you just let them know, like, you can be better than me. You can do stuff that no one's ever seen. I think we're always trying to say, let this person be the next this, the next that. And for some odd reason, whenever I'm at NEBJ, people, for some reason, you can tell me, think I look like Stuart Scott, but I don't. Okay.
He said, but I don't. I see it.
Yeah, but no, along that vein, people's like, oh, because I'm in the sports vein, people say like, oh, you could be the next Stuart Scott. And I've met Stu, at least I had a chance to late Stu, and I was fortunate enough to pick his brain, but I just don't want to be that. I want to be the first Justin Walters. And I think we have to make sure that we share that with individuals, that just be the first you, be authentic, and just don't try to navigate thinking like, oh, this person did that, so maybe I should do this. Like, nah, I believe in you, you're gonna kill it, don't worry about my story. You're writing your story, you're still in your chapter.
Chelsea, would you like to?
I can give my time up to other attendees.
Perfect, we'll do one last question.
Last question. Hi, I'm Verna Smith, and 30 years ago, I was where you guys are. And I thought, boy, I graduated from the right school, I knew the right people, and I would just keep building to the points that I wanted to be. Just to find out that there was nobody, the few blacks that were there, had no access to power. All I can ask of you as I look back at my career and where you are today is to make sure that as you move up, just in ICs in broadcast journalism, I graduated in broadcast journalism from the Newhouse School many years ago, and as I said, if you guys don't put in place in your mind subconsciously that every time you run into a black reporter, they are really on their own. We weren't given any mentors, and the few blacks that were there were so nervous, they didn't want to mentor us. So we have to, I'm glad that NYABJ is providing these opportunities for us to network, because most of the black journalists who graduated 30, 35 years ago, we are nowhere, and we should have been. But there was nobody to show us the steps. There was nobody to call at night to say, how do we do this? And there was nobody there really wanting us to be there. So all I can say, as someone who is now an independent producer, nobody is focusing on my passion, which is politics, under which we are underrepresented. They want to hear from us, but they don't want our reporters to tell them how we see our communities and where we ought to go. So I want to congratulate you, the panel, those of us who are here to make this possible, Dorothy, and to say to you, even when you don't say it, every time you run into a black journalist, male or female, say to yourself, how can I, without anybody knowing, give them a chance to move up? Because if you don't move us up, in time, we will be nowhere in the industry. Thank you very much.
And with that, I think we're actually done this time. So one more round of applause.
So we're going to move into our next panel, which is Being True to You, Navigating Discrimination in the Media Industry. We're just going to take a quick song break as our panelists come to the stage. We do have hand sanitizer at the entrance. Everyone keeps talking about this COVID-19. And then we even went and got our own little mix with alcohol and some water. So, so we're good. We're good here, all right?